Hi, my name is Bob Resselman, and I'm a software developer and a courseware developer with a background in educational psychology. And I'm going to talk to you today about creating interactive courseware and applying a fundamental principle of educational psychology to your courseware development. And that principle is Bloom's taxonomy. So before I go into Bloom, what I want to go over is just the basics of what we're going to talk about. The first thing you need to know is that creating courseware to facilitate an effective learning experience isn't just about getting content, gathering up content and throwing it into a couple PowerPoint slides or even throwing it into a web page and showing it. Actually, that content needs to be organized. And it should be organized according to some sort of educational framework, some sort of way of understanding how learning happens and how people absorb knowledge optimally. And so the one I like to use is Bloom's taxonomy. Bloom's taxonomy is a framework that describes how people learn in a developmental manner. And if you use Bloom's taxonomy in your courseware development, you might find that your courseware is more engaging. It has a high degree of retention for those viewing it. And you might find it easier to make courseware because you're working with a framework. So let's go into what Bloom's taxonomy is. And Bloom's taxonomy is a framework for learning. It was created by Benjamin Bloom way back in 1956. And if you've taken any sort of educational psychology course, you're pretty much introduced to Bloom immediately. And it's a taxonomy that says, hey, people learn in developmental stages, and if you understand these stages, you can create your curriculum and courseware accordingly, which is what we're going to do. So what is Bloom's taxonomy? Well, Bloom's taxonomy divides learning into 6 stages. And these stages are knowledge at the bottom, comprehension, application, analysis, synthesis, and evaluation. And each of these stages have a particular way of working and a particular boundary of what can be learned within a given stage. So let's talk about what each stage is about. Knowledge is about identifying. Okay, that hey, there's some knowledge out there, and even at an elementary level with a child, you can start talking about, okay, here's a picture of a cat, and here's a picture of a dog, and here's what a cat looks like, here's what a dog looks like. And then comprehension is remembering what the learner's been presented with, that the learner can actually remember what they're supposed to learn. So if you show a child a picture of a cat and a picture of a dog, and you ask them to point to the picture of the cat, they can do that because they remember that piece of knowledge. And then using that knowledge, which is the 3rd stage, application, is where the learner can actually take what they've learned and apply it in a really simple manner to something. So, for example, if you're doing a spelling test, spelling lesson, you could say, here's how to spell cat, and then you can ask them to spell cat, and then you can say, oh, by the way, use the word cat in a sentence. That's application. And analysis is a higher level in the developmental process. And that's where you can actually start seeing patterns in learning. And you can talk about, gee, there's something going on in there that's sort of general, and you have generalizations. Then synthesis is the ability to take disparate patterns and connect them together into something new. And critical thinking is the ability to start taking an observational look at knowledge and evaluating it, saying, gee, this makes sense, this doesn't make sense, gee, this is right, this could be wrong, this is theoretical, this is practical, all that is stuff. So let's look at how that falls into place concretely. So if we're looking at knowledge, as I mentioned earlier, knowledge is, here's a cat, here's a dog, and you present that to a child and you say, okay, cat is spelled C-A-T, dog is spelled D-O-G. By the way, here's what a cat looks like, here's what a dog looks like. Comprehension, next stage is you say, okay, you present the learner, in this case a child, with a picture, and the picture is on the right, and you say, is this picture correct? And if the child really understands, has a comprehension of what a cat is, say, no, that really doesn't look like a cat, it probably looks like a dog, so the label is wrong. The next stage, application, is, as I mentioned earlier, use the word cat in a sentence, that you can actually take what you learn and do something with it. The next stage, analysis, is the ability to start doing some sort of inference and looking at patterns. So you can go to the thesaurus and say, gee, is there another word for cat? And when you go to the thesaurus, say, yeah, feline is another word for cat. And then you start developing, word associations and a broader vocabulary. And then synthesis is being able to take, again, two disparate concepts, in this case, the spelling of the word cat and the word feline, and put them together, and you get a felis catus. And in this case, that's the Latin term for a domestic house cat in biology, right? Felis catus, that's a house cat. And so what the field of biology has done is they use Latin and start creating a synthesis of terms based on some fundamental words. And then evaluation. When you get up into evaluation, that's typically where you see people starting to do things like writing term papers or a master's thesis, or in case, a doctoral dissertation. And so taking the notion of cat, we could write a doctoral dissertation on the cause and effects of the propagation of cat videos on the internet. Again, you need to know a lot in order to do that, but in order to have all that knowledge, you need to go through the 6 stages to get to the evaluation stage. So that's really what Bloom's about. So then the question is, well, how do we apply this to courseware development and educational psychology in general, and technical education, educational theory in general, and technical education in particular? And my position is this: I think that online learning tools and interactive learning tools and self-directed learning tools are really good for the bottom 3 stages: knowledge, comprehension, and application. You can learn how to spell online. I try to learn foreign languages online using online tools, and I can get a basic knowledge, and I can understand, I can do comprehension. Okay, I can tell, I can, do spelling, and I can use words in a sentence. When I'm doing foreign language learning, though, when I want to start having a conversation, it's really hard to have a conversation online with an online tool, unless it's very, very smart. That doesn't work out. And that's where I need a human being to start it. I need a human being to be there so I can interact with them. So the top level is analysis, synthesis, and evaluation. That's really good for instructor-led courseware. You really need a human being there. But the lower levels, knowledge, comprehension, and application, it's really good for self-directed interactive online learning, where people can go at their own pace, make mistakes, learn from their mistakes, and really not have that sort of pressure of having another person in front of them having to interact with that person. Really, I'm on my own. I'm figuring it out on my own. And so that's a way you might want to start considering your technical curriculum development in general, and how you use online interactive courseware. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to actually show you how I take the bottom 3 layers, knowledge, comprehension, and application, and I use it to create a course. And I use Instruct. I'm a big Instruct fan. I like Instruct because it is interactive. You can actually check people's answers. You can provide quizzes and all that stuff. So that's really good. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how I did this in Instruct. All right, so this is my Instruct interactive track to teach learners how to use the JQ utility. And JQ is a command line utility that you can use in Linux that parses JSON data, and you can use it for searching, filtering, prettifying. You can also execute conditional statements under it. But the important thing to understand about this is that I'm really focused on the bottom 3 levels of Bloom's taxonomy. Knowledge, comprehension, and application. Here's what JQ is. Here's how you can use it. So if you look at the topics that are part of the track, I show you how to install. I show you how to create the example data. I show you how to exercise some basic commands. I show you how to do filtering, and I show you how to change data and work with conditional statements. Now, the important thing to understand here is that this is all, again, low-level stuff. This is knowledge, comprehension, and application. And as a matter of fact, you can see I'm biasing a lot to application. I'm not really quizzing people on the command line of using JQ. So let's go here and let me start the track. And this is my Instruct track, and here it is. I do the bottom level, the knowledge part. JQ's command line utility that allows you to search, filter, prettify content in a JSON format, and also JQ allows you to use conditional statements to parse and present JSON data according to a particular requirement. In this lesson, you'll install JQ and verify that it's been installed. In the lessons that follow, you'll learn about the many ways you can use JQ at the command line. Again, this is really knowledge, comprehension, application. So when I start up the interactive learning environment. Just on a side note, I'm not requiring anybody to type. All you have to do is copy and paste, and that's good because typing means if you're a bad typist like me, means you can make bad mistakes because I'm not a very good typist. So you can see I have to update this. And I'm really not going into why you have to update it. That's more the analysis stuff on the higher level. If this was instructor-led, which this is now, I would say, okay, here's why we need to update. But in this case, this is really getting the learner to where they want to be, that they can start using JQ. And then I'm going to install JQ, which I do next, because they should know how to install it. And then I show them how to use the help file. So again, and again, this is application stuff, but this would actually take care of the knowledge and comprehension levels, because this is where you gain the knowledge to use JQ. So the next part, I'll go into the next thing. Okay, and I give a little setup of what they're going to be doing in the lesson. And again, now I go to my working directory where I keep my JSON data. And then actually I make the directory because I'm going to put the JSON data in there. And I copy this in, and now I have some JSON data in there. And then I do a verification. And just on a side note, under instruct, I can do a check to make sure all the data has been properly installed. I didn't do it here just in the absence of time, but if I had more time, I'd put that check in. You can do it under instruct. And then I'm loading my next challenge. And now in this one here, I'm actually going to show some concrete application of JQ. And so I go to my working directory, and then I show how to display the JSON data here. And then I show them a first name, how to get data according to first name property. And so that's the basics. Now, I'm not going to go through the whole instruct. The important thing to understand here is that I really am looking at the lower levels. And the lower levels are, again, knowledge, comprehension, and application. I'm really showing, okay, here's JQ. I didn't go into why JQ isn't like YAML, but I'm going to assume that the comprehension is here. These are adult learners. You don't need that sort of a verification. But more importantly, I'm spending a lot of time on the application level. And that's good because, again, interactive online learning tools are very good for exercising application. And that's where you really want to be. So let's go back to here. Let me just bring this back. Let's go to full screen mode, and let me just, again, in closing, review the 6 levels of Bloom's taxonomy. You have knowledge, you have comprehension, application, analysis, synthesis, and evaluation. And again, what you want to do is you might find that as you're developing your courseware, when you want to focus, if you're doing interactive online courseware, you want to focus on the knowledge, comprehension, and application stages. Those can be standalone. They don't really require a lot of human interaction. But when you start going to analysis, synthesis, and evaluation, you really want to have some instructor-led capability around. That could either be some sort of online chat or anything that you can get a human being, because again, human beings are very good at for teaching the higher levels of Bloom. So there you have it. I hope you found this introduction to applying Bloom's taxonomy to your technical courseware useful. I've found it very useful. I make all my courseware according to Bloom, and I hope you again find that it's applicable for the courseware you're developing. So thanks for taking the time to view this video.